Good afternoon and welcome to Business as Usual. This is Audrey Russo, President and CEO of the Pittsburgh Technology Council, and I'm also joined by Jonathan Kirsting, who's Vice President of all things media at the Tech Council. Thrilled to be here, very excited about my guest today, and I just want to lay up the call for a few things, get some housekeeping out of the way, and give a shout out to our sponsors. Huntington Bank has been with us right from the onset. I believe we're in our 70-something day of doing these daily calls. I can't even keep track anymore, but Huntington Bank actually partnered with us from the onset, and they have been doing a lot of work with businesses of all sizes during this pandemic and through all the loan offerings and accommodations through the CARES Act. So also we have the Webb Law Firm. They've been around in Pittsburgh since 1845, just a short period of time. Oh, yeah. And they have a lot of experience in intellectual property law, and they represent companies large and small all over the world. And sometimes they're representing some of the most fascinating cases in intellectual property that's even known to all of us. And their disciplines are multidisciplinary. They have lots of scientists and engineers on their team in addition to lawyers. Thank you, Webb. They've been long partners with us. So I've muted everyone's microphone so that way we can't hear your background noise, hopefully. And we will also have a chat, and the chat is intended to be interactive. So while you're muted, you can interact, and Jonathan will monitor those questions to see if there's any appropriate time to ask John some of those questions. And also, we are not asking you to sell anything, okay? This isn't an opportunity to sell. So with all that said, I'm just going to jump right in. I'm absolutely thrilled to have an opportunity to introduce John Dick. I've known John Dick for 12 years. And I watched him when he was just a sole guy building a company. And I think he was located in the Terminal Way and had one desk and was determined to build this company, and to see where he is today and all the work that he's done is just blows my mind. I'm a huge fan of his. He has an incredible newsletter that comes out every Saturday. He'll share his email address, and he'll talk a little bit about that in a minute, but it actually makes my week. You're probably not gonna find a guy who cares as deeply, not just about his work, but about his family and about the community. And he is just always has something brilliant to say. And that's no BS. I've just watched him, and I'm proud to call him a friend and a colleague. So I am going to bring John. John, how are you? Thank you so much for being here. And you know everything I said was not BS.
Yeah, it was pretty flattering. I feel like it's all downhill from here, right? I'm
not sure all down from here. I know. It's all down from here.
So just a high bar there, Audrey. A high bar. I like it.
Thank you.
Talk about Civic Science. Just sort of give us, the elevator pitch about who is Civic Science and why.
We're a consumer research company. So we combined some really kick-ass software that was built by some folks at Carnegie Mellon with a really large database we capture of survey data. Really clever model, I think. We've embedded polls inside of hundreds of different web properties that allow us to engage people while they're reading content, and it just allows us to gather consumer data at a really unprecedented scale. We're up to about 7 million polls a day that we do.
A day?
Yeah, 7 million a day. So just large scale. Yeah, it was like 4 million in January, so it's growing pretty fast. But it just allows us to study everything. Our kind of ethos is that everything affects everything, and everything is constantly changing. So we study everything constantly. That's just the general idea. So we're tracking a couple 100,000 survey questions at any time, and studying the marriage in between all of those things. Of course, now, a significant amount of what we do is COVID related, and helping brands and retailers and media companies and hedge funds kind of predict where the world's going based on what we can see in consumer trends. And the business has been growing really fast the last couple of years, really fast the last 3-4 months. And so, yeah, we are, it's kind of a good time to be in the real-time information business, right? Because everybody's looking for any insight they can find to help them manage this new world and where it's going. Yeah.
Well, so you're located physically, you were located in East Liberty?
Company offices, the currently empty offices in East Liberty. Liberty, we miss it dearly. of course, now everybody's working from home, and just a few days ago, we allowed everyone to go in and sort of rate out all their desks and chairs and such, because we think it's going to play for the long haul.
So yeah, you've made the adjustment. Obviously, it's been rapid fire. You're adapting to this new world. How are you able to grow so quickly in a 16-week period? How are you able to accommodate that?
Well, the accommodating part's hard. I mean, it's all been inbound, right? I mean, we're not going on sales calls and things. So it's just, as you mentioned, we publish a ton of content.
Right.
I think that the thing that we do better than maybe any company I can think of is content marketing. And because we can write about anything. On cue, Jonathan, my dog started barking as soon as we started.
And our cue, don't worry about it.
Totally fine.
So let me put the headphones in so we can mitigate a little bit of that. That content we've been writing every day about trends, COVID-related trends and so forth. And it just got a lot of people to raise their hands and say, hey, can you tell me this about my consumer and my business? And so we were just dealing with a deluge of inbound interest. And the hard part's been, we're also hiring. So onboarding new people and managing the onboarding of new people is very difficult, right? And also too, trying to convey culture, right? It's easy to convey that in an office setting. It's not. I'm sorry. I'm going to shut my door and get rid of my dog.
My dogs can take over barking in the meantime, Audrey, because I think we have dual barking dogs right now. It's all good.
Classic timing. Okay. So if you're not used to this yet, you haven't been on Zoom enough. That's been the challenging part for us is trying to convey the culture of the business to a group of people who are only engaging with us on Zoom meetings, right? But no, it's so far so good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel the same way. I can't imagine, at least I know the people and I've worked with the people, and then we've migrated to working from home. I can't imagine what it would be like to be bringing new people in to that group and try to assimilate them, right?
Right.
At least you have your history with your existing folks.
Right.
So who are you hiring for real quick? And then we're going to, any vacancies, any?
Yeah, I mean, account management people, honestly, just servicing the new business we're bringing in. So hit us up if you're interested, for sure.
Okay. So let's just peel back then, like, I guess it's 4 months ago. At the onset of the pandemic, you immediately initiated a plan to ensure small businesses and local restaurants in particular, and making sure that they weren't going to suffer. Talk about what you did.
Well, I wouldn't say we were going to do much to ensure anything. I think we were hoping to do our parts, right? We're in love with the East Liberty neighborhood. We've done so much to try to, we patronize the office or the restaurants and bars there, obviously, and it just was hard and we got to know a lot of the owners, right? Just being part of the community. And I think whenever the office closed, we worried about that. And so what we offered all of our employees full company reimbursement for any meals that they purchased from local restaurants during the lockdown. Given the amount of money we've saved not traveling and not paying for parking and all of those other kinds of things, it was kind of a wash. So it was just a small gesture that we made, and it kind of grew into a larger gesture because shortly after we did it, Mark Cuban saw us tweet about it and he did the same thing. And then over the next several weeks, we heard just from more CEOs than I can count of companies that sort of did the same thing. So it was cool to watch sort of people. You do see the worst of people at times like this, but you see the best of them too. It's been pretty awesome.
So how is that going now? Are you still supporting local? How are you,
still doing it? Yep, we are. So we've encouraged people to try, obviously being in East Liberty with our ties to CMU, a lot of our team is based in Squirrel Hill and Friendship and so forth. So they're supporting those local restaurants, but we even allow people people who are working from home in Wexford or Peters Township or whatever, same thing. They keep receipts and we reimburse them for that again, what our entertainment budget would be if we were traveling, we're still net saving money, to be honest with you. So it wasn't, we're not Mother Teresa here, but it was a nice way to feel like we could help.
Right. And we're seeing the demise of many of these establishments. These local establishments, and even though you've ignited a lot of local tech companies have copied you, and they're doing that for their staff. Maybe not as much as you are, but at least maybe on weekends and doing things like that.
Yeah, hopefully.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So my hat's off to you. So So what are some of the bigger picture things? Let's really get into some of your data. I want to, let's talk about, pull something out that you want to talk about that you really think that we should be aware of what some of these moving trends are.
Well, I mean, I think the restaurant conversation is a good segue. We have, you know, when I do any kind of public speaking or such as it is now, I kind of always start with the same comment, which is that the consumer today is going to have a lot more power to influence our recovery than any state government or political figure or business, right? We see very little differences in economic performance, whether a state has been open, quote unquote, or not open. It's really driven more by what's the mindset and the profile of the consumer in a given area. For example, we know all of our data tells us that there are really three things influencing a consumer's view of this crisis. We're all doing some calculus in our head, consciously or not, about our measuring our desire for normalcy and our fear for our safety, right? And different people come down on different ends of that spectrum based on their health risks and their age and whether they live close to an area that's heavily concentrated with the virus. And the three things that are influencing that are, one is sort of our consumer confidence. So have I lost my job? Is my company shuttered? What's my personal financial situation look like? So that's influencing heavily. The second one is what we call safety and proximity, which is, do I live near a place that is heavily affected by the virus? Do I know people who've been heavily affected by the virus? That certainly weighs in, which is why we see differences in rural and urban areas. And then the biggest one, which is both obvious and tragically sad, frankly, is political tribalism. There's nothing I can predict more. Nothing that helps me predict more somebody's reaction to this virus and their consumer behavior than whether they watch Fox News or CNN. It's that simple. And yes, those things are also correlated to whether you live in a rural area or in an urban area. So we study that, right? So we're studying the interplay of those three things and how they affect different types of consumers, and based on those types of consumers, which brands and industry categories and things are affected the most, right? So a good example is that if you saw the earnings recently for Lowe's and Home Depot, Lowe's significantly outperformed Home Depot.
Right.
And the very simple explanation of that is Lowe's is in more rural suburban areas and attracts a more politically right-centered consumer who's more comfortable going out to stores and spending more money at Lowe's, right? So those things, that's the kind of stuff that we're tracking.
Right.
Obviously right now, we're seeing a bit of a backslide in confidence and comfort level with shopping. So we've got the last everything, whether it was eating in restaurants or shopping in stores, had been climbing. Confidence in that had been climbing really significantly for the last, until about 2 to 3 weeks ago, and all those gains are gone. In fact,
Really?
I just tweeted something before we started that confidence being in public places is at its lowest now than it's been throughout the entire pandemic, meaning even worse than at the very beginning of the lockdown.
Wow.
Yeah. So
Even here in Allegheny County, especially since all the new.
well, I know I was looking nationally, so those are national figures. But you know, what's interesting is that we started to see that shift even before the cases were going up. What was happening was consumers were seeing consumers were feeling unsafe. They were going to restaurants, they were going to stores, and they were seeing people flaunting the social distancing rules and saying, you know what, even though I can be out in those places, I'm not going to. We should have our dogs talk to each other, Audrey. So it was almost a leading indicator for the cases, right? The consumer on the ground level was saying, you know what, I went to this store and I went to this restaurant, people weren't wearing masks, and it kind of freaked me out, so I'm not going to do it anymore. And then we started to see the cases increase dramatically. It's almost like it was a bit of a canary in the coal mine. So regardless of whether a state requires masks or whether business is required or not, consumers feel safer when they see them, and you can't stop that, right? So that's trickling its way down into a lot of different industries that we're looking at and how it's impacting different brands and brand categories. I can go into.
Yeah, could you go into that a little bit? Yeah.
Well, I mentioned the Lowe's and Home Depot example. You know, I think the truth of the matter is that restaurants and bars are going to have a really tough time. Simply because the more we learn about this virus, the more we learn that its spread is heavily correlated with indoor activities, right? And populated, sort of densely populated indoor activities. And so the thing, if you consider that the consumer who's most concerned about this virus is an older female, so like the quintessential concern. So we know people who are older and people who are female are more concerned than people who are younger and people who are male. So you think about, what does that consumer do, and what does that tell you about how long it will be till that consumer is comfortable doing something again? And I'll tell you very, very definitively, the thing that I would be most concerned about reopening in any year would be like the performing arts. So you've got like the worst of all conditions, right? You've got indoor, closely packed, tends to be over indexed audience of older women, right? So I would bet on sports and live concerts before I would bet on performing arts, because sports and concerts attract either younger people or men or both, right? And so just a lot of what we can see in trends in consumerism are traced back to what's the profile of the consumer that does that thing. Chick-fil-A is outperforming Popeyes because of the audience that they attract. Chick-fil-A tends to attract a more politically conservative group of people who are less cautious about the virus, right? And so, yeah, it's sometimes it's disappointing how predictable all of that is, but it's highly predictable. Yeah.
Well, that's really interesting about the performing arts, if you just sort of localize that. And I also know your interest with your own family, that you have a talented daughter, and you yourself play around a little bit in music. I know that there's been a lot of experimentation with the virtual engagements of the arts. But I'm worried for Pittsburgh, if I just focus on Pittsburgh right now and our commitment to the arts. And I'm worried because that has been one of our shining assets.
Correct. And it is concerning. And it employs a lot of people in Pittsburgh as well, in addition to just being part of our culture. I think the hope has to be, and we do sell our information and also give a lot of it away to governments and nonprofit organizations who are trying to support the broader cause here. And I think what we're seeing, which is gives me a little bit of hope and optimism, is that this wave of increases in cases are being approached a lot differently, because we're looking at very specifically. I think any shutdowns that will continue to happen are going to be very surgical in nature, right? It's not going to be, we're going to go back to yellow and just shut down everything that was shut down the last time, because we're not seeing cases from salons and gyms and so forth, right? So we're, the more confined we get in terms of the places we decide we have to keep shut down, and I'm afraid it's going to have to be bars and restaurants and entertainment venues, then the more targeted we can be with stimulus and government support, right? That first wave of stimulus went to kind of anybody who had a LLC, S Corp, or C Corp. Now we can say, if we had another $1 trillion in stimulus and said we're going to push all of that to support hospitality, entertainment, and dining, that dollar could get stretched a lot farther, and a lot more of those businesses can be preserved over however long this crisis is going to last.
Are there any local trends that you're seeing? I know you do a lot of national analysis and polling. Are there any local trends that you think would really be important for us to know?
Well, yes. I mean, I guess the trick here is sort of separating Allegheny County from the rest of the region as well. So because if you think about the political tribalism factor I mentioned before, but also the proximity issue, there are people. I grew up in Westmoreland County, and my friends from high school where I grew up, they don't know. There's not been any cases that they know or anybody that they know that's had it, and that's 25 minutes from here, right? And those are also people who are saying, why can't I travel into the city and go to a Penguins game? Meanwhile, all of us in Allegheny County are seeing, triple figure cases every day. So if we just stick to Allegheny County, one thing that is definitely true about Allegheny County is we outpace the nation in terms of our adherence to social distancing, at least such that people self-report it. Mask usage, observing social distancing rules, by and large, for a city like Pittsburgh, is higher than average. We tend to be a civically minded kind of rule following place, which is great, which is one of the things I love about Pittsburgh, and it's playing itself out in these numbers that we're seeing. You know, and even as these cases are popping up, we see that it tends to be a younger person, and a lot of it is people who left and came back and visited other places. So no, I think generally we are a more socially conscious, kind of rule conscious group, and I think that's playing itself out in people more likely to adhere to the rules in Allegheny County. But then again, if you cross over into Westmoreland or Washington County, you see like a completely different mindset, and a lot of that's just political.
Well, what do you think? So you talked about all this transformation over the last 4 months in your business and the changes in confidence, et cetera. What do you think is here to stay? What do you think in terms of your surveying and polling?
Well, a lot. I mean, certainly I think we're going to see fundamental changes in the way people think about work. And I would not bet big on Manhattan commercial office real estate as a long-term investment right now, for example. I think Pittsburgh can do better because we're not New York. I would bet bigger on office spaces in places like East Liberty and sort of not in like dense central business areas. So that's certainly one of them. Incidentally, real quick, because I know you saw me write about this last Saturday and everybody got a kick out of it. It's like, I'll tell you what things that aren't here to stay is like eye makeup sales are way through the roof and lipstick sales are way depressed, right? Because of masks, because
I know, who needs lipstick when you have a
buying
mask?
eye makeup and not buying lipstick, you know? So there are lots of trends like that. I also mentioned like youth baseball sales, youth baseball equipment sales are way up because kids can't share bats and gloves like they would on teams before. And so there's a lot of like kind of discerning between the things that are very, very short-lived and very now who knows, we might be wearing masks for a while, so maybe that makeup sale data will continue to be true. And then the medium-term things will probably be office space, the way people think about that in real estate. Probably the one that I think is most profoundly here to stay in the biggest way is telehealth, which probably is relevant to a lot of people on your in your audience in the tech industry and healthcare tech industry. The rise in the use of telemedicine in the last 3 months has just been like meteoric. And it's not just been the absolute numbers of telemedicine users, but the profile of the user has evolved, because it used to be before COVID, the telemedicine user was younger, more tech savvy. Meanwhile, we know that the largest portion of the healthcare population is older and less tech savvy. Well, COVID has sort of been a force function to get people who weren't comfortable going to a doctor's office or couldn't go to a doctor's office have learned not only can they have really good care over a device, but it's actually not that hard, right? These were Luddites, I think, who were afraid or intimidated of using a device to talk to their doctor, and now they're learning that it's actually really easy. And that's definitely here to stay, because why the hell would you go into a doctor's office waiting room with a bunch of other sick people if you don't have to? And if you think about what the ripple effects of that will be, is we expect to see a huge growth in industry around at-home healthcare tech. So if I can have better and more devices for diagnostics at home, measurement at home, it'll actually improve health outcomes, because I might be able to do an EKG at home. I might be able to do things much more easily on an app or a device or whatever. And I know there's some of that burgeoning now, but it's going to explode because the population of people doing virtual medicine is just, and it's across pretty much every demographic group. That's probably the one I would expect to have changed the most. Well, it has changed the most, but I think that's going to be a change for forever.
Well, I've heard that there's
doctors, right? They'll be able to see more patients,
right,
provided the insurance companies reimburse the way that they do in person. So that's probably the big one. I see some questions coming into the chat. I don't know if you
are there some questions? Let's see.
About how do you collect all your data every day? Millions of data points. How is that being funneled in? That's a question from our own Brian Kennedy here.
Brian, longtime listener, first time caller.
Yeah.
So it helps that we're on hundreds of the largest, websites in the world. I mean, we get our polling widget. So for those of you out there that are in advertising or ad tech or digital, our polling widgets, which are JavaScript embeds, will get over like 1.1 billion page views of web real estate this month. We don't pay for any of that real estate. It's a barter with the publisher. We give them some insight into their traffic, and they give us back the data. It's all CCPA, GDPR compliant too, by the way, and non-cookie dependent. But we're just really good at asking questions that get people engaged in the survey or poll, and so we give them some really cool results at the end that get them to come back and answer more. There's no money changing hands either with us and the respondent, which is most survey research, by the way, or us and the publisher. So it's just this delicate balance of barter we have with the respondent and barter with the publisher that allows us to get that level of volume. That 7 million has the potential to double over the summer. We have a couple really big websites I can't mention by name, publisher networks that are coming on board too. So it's almost, the longer we're in business, the more history our data has, the more predictive it is. But certainly the more of it we have, more data is always better than less. So we've definitely seen an uptick in engagement since COVID. People are opinionated. People are glued to the internet a lot more than they were before. So we would expect that to come down a little bit eventually. Although next thing you know, we'll be in the election cycle.
What is your, what about the whole notion of all these subscription services? Are you doing any polling around that? Are you seeing some
subscription, like subscription retail or subscription? What do you mean?
Like everything, food services, home delivery, subscriptions to, we're seeing a huge amount of uptick in the market in terms of that.
And we are, interested, and there are some winners and some losers in that, because a lot of those services weren't equipped to handle the kind of nonlinear growth that they've seen, right? Actually, grocery delivery in particular blew an opportunity.
You think?
We sort of have seen a plateau in adoption of grocery delivery because so many people who went and tried to do it had a terrible experience with it, either because they couldn't get a reservation slot at Giant Eagle, or they ordered a bunch of things and then when their delivery was due, 2/3 of the things they ordered weren't on shelves. And so grocery delivery had a huge opportunity to have its like moment in the sun, and it kind of blew it. And so a lot of consumers have just said, you know what, screw it. It's actually, the more we learn about masks and so on and so forth, it's not as much of a risk for me to go into the grocery store. And I can, if an item I want to buy isn't there, I can pick an alternative while I'm there, which is another big problem with the supply chain issues that we've dealt with. So, but then other areas of subscription content actually has improved. So your New York Times subscriptions, your sort of paid online subscriptions for those kinds of things have gone up because people are consuming more news.
They are.
Yeah. So, but by and large, it's anything that's at home and direct to consumer is doing pretty well right now.
And you predict that people's comfort levels with that will be sticky afterwards. If there's an app.
Well, I mean, once you sign up, that's the thing about subscriptions, right? Is it's like, people always forget to get rid of them, and it's just that we're either lazy or forgetful about it. So whether it continues to grow much beyond COVID, I don't know, but the people that have sort of jumped on the bandwagon now will likely stay there.
So what's like the most surprising data that you have found over the last few weeks? Think of something, because you're doing polling all the time. I'm constantly one of your people that are always taking your polling.
Yeah.
Some people in their spare time do that. I do that. I go onto your site and I take the polls. Some of the questions crack me up, and I know that you have a method to your madness there. So can you give us another example of something over the last, 12 weeks?
Yeah, it's actually, well, one thing I'll say is that the method to our madness is to not have a method to our madness, right? So we have, I think the coolest jobs in our company are the team of people we have that just write questions all day, whether it's germane to the news cycle or germane to like any sort of random thing you could possibly think of about like, do you let people wear shoes in your house, stuff like that. Because our idea, the general idea is that since we can ask anything that we want in these massive numbers, we ask anything we can possibly think of, and then we let the machines tell us what's related, right? Or what's predictive and what have you. And it's like, and I'm just astonished all the time at the things we find that are correlated to one another. And I know you've seen some of that in talks that I've given. We've got 1 million of them. But on a more serious note, I would say the thing that's probably surprised me the most is as we look at, and it makes sense the more you think about it, but it definitely surprised me when I saw the results. I have two examples. One was just from yesterday. The question was around how comfortable are you or eager are you to return to work? And that was asked to both people who are working from home and remote, people who are working from home and getting paid, or actually at home and getting paid but not working. So like lots of maybe people in teaching, for example. And then of course the percentage of Americans who've actually lost their job because of COVID, 15% or so of Americans. The group that is actually less eager and comfortable returning to work are the people who've lost their jobs, which seemed really counterintuitive to me, right? Because financially you'd think. And so when you dig into those numbers a bit, there's definitely some truth to a group of those people who are making more money on unemployment insurance than they would be in those jobs. But that's a smaller group. The larger group are the people who, because a lot of the people who've lost their jobs are people who work in jobs that are considered less safe right now, right? People in hospitality, people in the service industry, and so on. And it's interesting because we see it a lot of the groups of people who are both confronted with the financial impact of this virus and the health impact of it, which tends to be a lot of the same people, particularly in urban areas and minorities. When they're weighing those two things, they choose their health and safety over their financial well-being, right? Which I think is the way we should be as human beings, by the way, not to editorialize, but they're saying, yeah, I could go back to work and put myself in a really unhealthy position or unsafe position. And if I have to make that trade-off, I'd rather not go back to work. And so that surprised me. I think we would have expected to see the people who've lost their jobs and because of that are likely in more financial difficulties would probably be more cavalier about going back into the office, and we're seeing the exact opposite, which is both surprising and I think positive.
Yeah. Anything else?
Well, yeah, we ran one yesterday where we asked people, it was a little bit of a trick question or gamification of a question where we essentially asked people if they would be willing to voluntarily contract the virus to accelerate herd immunity. And
Oh, I saw that.
Yeah.
What were the findings?
Yeah, because there's this group of people out there, a certain spectrum, a certain end of the spectrum, politically speaking, who are saying, "Oh, this thing isn't a big deal. Look, the death rates are minuscule. The masks are stupid because we're all going to get the virus anyway." Da, 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 da. So we wanted to see how many of those people would kind of put their money where their mouth is and say, well, if the virus is if it's a big scam and it's really not all that deadly, and we're going to get it anyway, then why don't I just go voluntarily get it to help accelerate the process? And it turned out, maybe it's not surprising, but it was a tiny group of people who said they would be willing to do it, which means they're a little bit full of it. When push comes to shove, they're deep down inside probably more cautious and scared than they want to let on Facebook. So
I know. Well, listen, your work in terms of sentiment and confidence and data and correlation is to me, it's priceless. And I'm proud to know you. And Pittsburgh should be proud to know that you're here doing this work, and because you could be doing it anywhere. So any final, any song you want to sing for us? Anything you want to sign off? And I'm going to tell everyone that you need to sign up for his Saturday morning. I call it email. That's the best way I can articulate it. But every Saturday morning, if you just want to write John, he can get you on the mailing list. Lexi will put up his email. But it is a pure delight. I hope one day that he puts them into some sort of book and archives it. I don't know how you archive it now, but it's personal, it's delightful, it's fact-based, and it gives you a little bit of insight into John, the man, and John, the company that he's run. And John also happens to be in a band, and sometimes when he speaks, he gives us some entertainment. So I just wanted to open that up as a way to close down the show. If there's anything,
bars, right? Couple bars.
The floor is yours.
I guess I just would want to probably play that back to you a bit and say how proud we are to be in Pittsburgh and be part of Pittsburgh and the tech community here. And it's I think what you've done, Audrey and Jonathan and Brian, keeping people connected, bringing us together every day, almost every day. I talk to peers of mine in entrepreneurs and tech industries and other parts of the country, and they're not, this isn't happening everywhere. We're not, places aren't as much of a community as we are. And even going back to the comment I made before about us being more socially responsible about social distancing and following the rules and all of that. Like there's a real palpable sense. Now, of course, there's outliers, right? But the sense of community here, both at an individual level and in our tech industry, and also too, I was on another sort of group, more smaller like entrepreneur group yesterday, and people trying to help each other and helping each other through this, and it's an awesome thing to be a part of. It's not, I think we take for granted, because we're so used to the work that you guys do to keep everybody connected, that it's not like this in most, if any, other city that I'm aware of. So thank you for having me. I'd love to come back sometime, maybe when we can update you on all the newest and latest things that we're seeing, maybe as the holidays approach or back to school or whatever. Anything I can do to support.
Exactly.
That's back to school. That's a whole other show. We've got a lot of parents that want to talk about that.
Nothing I get asked about more than that topic right now. So,
where to find you, John. Absolutely. That's awesome, man. We need to have you.
Well, thank you, John. Thanks, everyone. And join us tomorrow. I think tomorrow's Thursday. Yeah, we're not working on Friday.
No way.
So we are going to take the day off. And I want to thank you. If you don't know Civic Science, I cannot tell you enough times. You need to get to know them, take some of their polls, see the data, follow John on Twitter. You'll see a lot of amazing information that I like to extract from, and gives me, you actually saved me from watching and reading unnecessary stuff. So I appreciate that. I appreciate that. So John Dick with Civic Science. Thank you, Jonathan, for being with us. Thank you, everyone. And if you want to reach out to John, just let us know. If you didn't catch his email address, we'll be sure to share that with you. But you really need to get on his weekly email. I promise you it'll be worth it. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day. His email address is, okay. Yay, John Dick. What's your email address? John Dick. That's it, right?
It's jdick@civicscience.com.
Mm-hmm.
Bingo.
JDick. If not, we'll put it out. We'll put it out there.
Okay.
Okay, thanks, John. Lots of thanks. Thanks.
Awesome. Stay in touch.
Thanks so much, buddy.
Bye.